Professor Oppenheimer's very first visit to Korea, and he has decided to spend that time here with you at Ewha Law School. Please give a warm round of applause.
You sure you don't want to wait and see how the talk goes? Oh, okay, very good. So, first of all, thank you very much, Professor Kim, and thank you, Judge, now retired Judge, Attorney Kim, for hosting me here in Seoul. And thank you, Professor, for sponsoring this talk. About 15 years ago, I became interested in the question of how different legal systems address the problem of inequality. And partly inequality in employment discrimination against women, against people of color, against people based on their sexual orientation or disability. I had worked on such cases in the United States as a lawyer and as a clinical law professor, handling such cases with my students. And I became interested in the question of how other legal systems approach these problems. And I quickly learned two things. One, that there is an enormous diversity in how different legal systems address the problem of inequality. And two, that it wasn't likely that I would ever become a true expert in all of the different systems and all of the different approaches that different legal systems and different legal cultures took to address the problem of inequality, particularly if you see it in its broadest terms. And I was interested in questions like hate speech, reproductive rights, affirmative action in universities and in employment, the problem of employment discrimination. I saw these as unified, as all of them connected to problems of race-based and gender-based and identity-based inequality. And I realized that I needed help to figure out, first, how to understand this material, and second, how to teach the material. Because as soon as I got interested in the material, I started trying to teach it. And so over most of these 15 years, I have been traveling to various parts of the world and meeting with people who were experts in their own country in the problem of inequality, and who often had some comparative basis between 2 or 3 different legal systems. And one of the things we talked about is, how do we leverage what we know? Now, I think that's important because inequality is a worldwide problem. I think there is enormous benefit in studying comparative equality law, partly because I don't think we really know our own legal system until we have studied other legal systems and seen how they creatively, or not so creatively, approach problems in different ways than we do. So much that we can learn from studying comparative equality, but such a challenge in terms of how to do so effectively. Add to that the fact, as I'm sure you well know, that different students learn in different ways. And so if all we do, for example, is lecture, students who learn best from listening will benefit from those lectures, particularly if you're lucky enough to have good lecturers. But other students learn best from reading. Others learn best from speaking and discussing. For a long time, I thought that the student who would always raise his or her hand in class and want to talk constantly was simply showing off. And then I realized, as I learned more about the psychology of learning and learning styles, that there's a group of students who simply learn best by talking and discussing and articulating their ideas. And so this is a part of how some people learn. Some people learn best from writing, some from doing research. And then, again, one of the things that became clear as I traveled to many parts of the world is that English has become the universal language of law. And everywhere I went, English was the second language and the language that students had in common. And they were studying in English, but it's really challenging to listen to a lecture in English when it's not your first language. It's really challenging to participate in a class taught in English when it's not your first language. And I wanted to think creatively about how to address that in a way that would optimize the opportunity for students to learn in the classroom. So I came up with, along with a friend of mine, a guy named Richard Ford, who's a law professor at Stanford, we came up with the idea of putting together a course in which we flipped the classroom. That's an expression commonly used now in the US. Is it used here? Is that an expression you are familiar with, to flip the classroom? Okay. The idea of flipping the classroom is that you deliver your lecture material through video or through web or putting it in some way on the web so that when you get to the classroom, you can discuss and engage with the material because the lecture has become part of the pre-class materials. And so Rich and I asked the question, we really asked two questions that come together here. One of the questions we asked was, how can we provide on video, through web access, lectures that are interesting and engaging and keep people alert and keep people focused? And how can we take advantage of all these people we've met all over the world who have more expertise than we do within any particular legal system and have thought comparatively about their legal system? Can we bring those two things together in an effective way? And in terms of learning style, can we put together a plan for a class in which students read, watch, discuss, research, write, present, all of those things? And so what we came up with was this comparative equality flipped classroom. We've put our lectures on video, but they're not normal lectures. They are a series of discussions that we've had about the reading material. And they are interspersed with interviews that we did in 6 cities, in Paris, London, Brussels, Hong Kong, New York, and Washington. And some of you are thinking, you just wanted to get a nice big travel budget so you could go to all those places. That would not be totally untrue. But it's not that we just wanted that. We wanted to keep the material lively, and we wanted to provide some kind of a running transcript so that students for whom English was not their first language could follow the material that we were presenting and could slow it down if they wanted to. They can also speed it up. And so that they could go back and cover everything or any particular part of it again. We have developed a web course consisting of 16 one-hour web classes with 120 recordings and interviews with 36 experts from around the world, plus a few recordings of class discussions in the classroom at 2 law schools in Paris. So again, we interviewed in several different locations. What we ended up with, what the web platform looks like, and I'm going to show it to you in a minute, is that along the left side, there is a table of contents, and it's active. So you can go to any place in the table of contents and press on it, and it will take you to that class, and within that class, the particular discussion you're interested in. Along the right side, there is a running English transcript. And again, it's live So if you realize that you're not sure what somebody meant, you can go back and simply click on the conversation at that point, and you will immediately go back to that point, so that it's a live link. And then in the center is the actual tape of the discussion. So let me show you an example of this, and these are tiny clips that I've taken of longer interviews and conversations. Each class, each of the 16 classes, is approximately 8 clips that adds up to approximately 1 hour of viewing time or engagement. There we go. By contrast, in Europe, in a number of European countries now, the law requires that corporate boards be at least 40% women.
But really, the gender quotas agenda is a worldwide agenda.
Let me just point out, this is Professor Ruth Rubio Marin, who we're interviewing. She is Spanish. She is currently a professor at the European University Institute in Firenze in Florence, and she also has a joint appointment at NYU. And we are interviewing her here on the worldwide movement of gender parity.
So though I talk about it as some kind of European movement, it is to be enshrined in a wider movement. This is happening all over the world.
Now, students who've watched this on tape have also just read in the textbook about all of the countries around the world that have various kinds of gender parity systems. Some for electing parliaments, some for assuring gender equality or gender parity on corporate boards, some for positions within political parties. There is a worldwide movement of gender parity. And for anyone to look at the question of gender parity, or sometimes people would say gender quotas, in isolation within their own legal system, would miss 30 years of discussion outside their own legal system that has led to gender parity policies having been adopted in over half of the members of the United Nations, either in terms of democracy or in terms of corporate boards. So here's another example, introducing our students to Hong Kong anti-discrimination law. First with
we're here today with Peter Redding from Hong Kong's Equal Opportunities Commission. Thank you, Peter, for agreeing to talk to us. Could you tell us a bit about your background and a bit about what the commission does here in Hong Kong?
Yeah, sure. Well, I am one of the legal counsels in the Legal Services Division, which is the team in the EOC that does all the legal-related work. Well, the commission has been in existence since 1996, and it was set up because there was a sense of a need for discrimination law to be introduced in Hong Kong because there wasn't any prior to that.
Note what he says about why the Hong Kong law was passed. You're going to get a different view in the next excerpt.
And over the last those 17 years, there's been a series of discrimination ordinances that have been introduced.
And moving right to Kelly Loper, who is a professor at Hong Kong University who specializes in anti-discrimination law.
Another area, or another part of the world that we'll discuss is Hong Kong, which prohibits discrimination through several ordinances. There are ordinances prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race, on the basis of sex, on the basis of disability, and also on the basis
were actually enacted in the mid-1990s. And this was partly in response to the reaction of the British government and the British colonial government in Hong Kong to the events in 1989, the crackdown in 1989 in Tiananmen Square.
See, now the government official talking about where the impetus came from didn't say anything about Tiananmen Square. But the professor has a different perspective and is saying this is a response to Tiananmen Square. So I need a vote now. Can I show all of this in Shanghai next week? Or do I have to stop before I get to the reference of Tiananmen Square? Anyone have a view on that? Okay, maybe you'll tell me afterward. Okay, so part of what we've done is try to get people who are comparativists talking about why. What's the benefit? Why should we compare? And this is one that I think it's a great little clip from a wonderful young scholar.
A different realm, and I think that
let me just say, she's now at NYU, but when we did this interview at King's College in London, she was at Cambridge and came down for the day.
there are spaces where we see the interaction between equality, discrimination. What does discrimination? Does it actually mean just formal sense of differentiating, or does it involve a broader concept of substantive equality? Is it related to a transformative project? I think those terms mean quite different things comparatively, and I think the comparative project is exciting in discrimination law, primarily for the reason that the body that we call discrimination law is in fact so distinct, but there's something quite shared between all of these jurisdictions because they've learned from one another.
So what I'd like you to imagine is that you've just had a reading assignment in your comparative equality class, and you've done the reading, and now, before you come to class, you have 1 hour of watching this grouping of interviews and discussion between Professor Ford and me to give you as much of the background as possible so that when we get to the classroom, we can start talking about your reaction to all of this material instead of our lecturing. And I will tell you, the first time we used the materials, we used them completely wrongly. It was terrible. We went into class and we gave our lecture again. So we just completely nullified the point of flipping the classroom. And we got some very good comments from students who said, "Why did you do that?" It was a sort of an obvious question, but not to us until we did it. And so this year, using these materials, and Professor Ahn was in the class visiting in Berkeley and sat in on some of these classes, we went right to discussion in a way that you can't do if you haven't had this in preparation. Here's another comparativist talking about the benefit of comparison, and here talking about sort of what's happened in modern feminism at the academic level. Oh, can I get it back? Yeah.
So we started this project in 2006 on governance feminism. Basically, governance feminism is a way of mapping the generational shift in the women's movement.
Let me add that when the product is in its final form, and this clip doesn't show it in its final form, you've got the transcript running down the right side. Because of the 36 people we interview, they are from all over the world. Their accents are from all over the world. Again, if English is not your first language, even if it is, it's not easy to follow sometimes, except that you have the transcript. So here we don't have it, but when this is complete, it's there.
Not just in the US, but actually all around the world. We saw certain similarities in the way women's movements had emerged. So essentially, in the 50s and 60s, the women's movements were really oppositional movements, which were outside the state, deeply skeptical of state power, deeply skeptical of the law. And so the second wave feminist movements were actually not heavily invested in the law. But we found that over the 80s and 90s, with the rise of the UN meetings around questions around gender, we actually found that the relationship between women's movements in the state actually began to shift. So where it used to be focused on protest earlier and opposition, it became much more a collaborative relationship with the state. So from opposition, it became collaboration, some would say even cooptation, a lot more consultation with the state. And so many governments around the world actually started to create institutions that dealt with questions of gender, and feminists found a foothold in those institutions. And so in effect, they became what some of us call 9 to 5 feminists.
What a great expression. Here's a clip where we're interviewing Sheila Foster of Fordham University, who's a former student of mine. And I can't tell you how proud it makes one when a former student becomes a colleague and a highly noted professor. And she's actually a co-author of mine as well. An expertise in comparative environmental racism. But here talking primarily about environmental racism as an issue within the United States, and then we broaden it with some other interviews.
Hi, thank you for joining us. Could you introduce yourself to our students?
Yes, hi, my name is Sheila Foster. I'm a professor at Fordham Law School in New York City, and I'm one of the co-authors of the book on comparative equality and anti-discrimination law.
Thank you. So you've written extensively about questions of environmental justice, the relationship between racial and class segregation in urban areas and the kind of health environmental issues that come along with living in isolated neighborhoods. Can you tell us a bit about that work and how those issues travel transnationally, whether they look the same in the United States and in Europe and Latin America, for instance, or whether they're different issues?
Right, so I look at questions of equality through the lens of not only racial segregation, but also the consequences of racial and geographic segregation in neighborhoods and in cities. And one of the consequences or the manifestations of racial inequality and economic inequality, and in particular the intersection between those two, are what kind of goods people have in neighborhoods that are segregated by ethnicity, race, or class. The environment is a kind of good.
What's our timing? When are we, how long do you all expect to be here? I'm sorry? Until? Well, no, because I can go longer or short. Another half hour? Okay, because I want to be sure to give you an opportunity to make some suggestions about this. So I'm going to go another, 10 minutes, and then we're going to break from watching the slides and talk about them. Okay, so this is a French professor of comparative employment discrimination law, talking about sexual harassment in France, a very different perspective than the American perspective on sexual harassment. And I don't know with regard to the Korean perspective, but we have a couple of experts here who may be able to tell us.
So sexual harassment is prohibited, but the question is the conception of sexual harassment. Under French law, the definition was pretty narrow. We had this idea that sexual harassment was the quid pro quo, really, notion under your system, and really requiring, demanding sexual absorption to be maintained at the workplace or to obtain some advantages in terms of careers. This was sexual harassment, really. It was quite limited in scope. When European Union law developed in that field, and the conception of sexual harassment was extended to include hostile environment, then it was complicated for French law to adjust, and it took time. Instead, French law was much more concerned by moral harassment, because it's a more neutral notion. It concerns everyone who is harassed, everyone, men, women. So there's no question of sex. back to the question, the focus is on harassment at the workplace.
Now here's a chance to hear an American perspective on the French issue about the headscarf and the prohibition of the headscarf from a young American scholar who I think is going to be, over the next 20 or 30 years, will become the leading US scholar in comparative equality law. She is absolutely brilliant and unbelievably productive in terms of her writing. Her name is Julie Suk, and I mention that in part because she is of Korean ancestry. Here she is.
And so for the headscarf ban, what's very interesting about the headscarf ban is that I think from the French perspective, anyway, it has been justified on grounds of equality itself. That is particularly, and we could just talk for a moment about the headscarf ban in the context of public schools.
Sorry, I didn't have more of that. Okay, and we may stop here after this. We filmed some class discussions that we've interspersed, and I thought this is, again, the French law, both on the headscarf and what is sometimes described in France as the burqa ban. Now, that's not a very good description because, in fact, it's a law prohibiting the covering of one's face. And burqa is not really the name of the piece of clothing that French women who cover their face for religious purposes wear. But that's maybe not surprising that the French got the name wrong under these circumstances. But it's a law, well, I don't want to go too far into it. You've read about it? Yes? You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so here's a discussion, a debate between some students at Sciences Po in Paris, in the law program there, about whether this is a good law or a bad law.
And the arguments led by the Republic of France and Belgium as well is that hiding one's face is failing to the very minimal requirements of the life in society. Because when hiding the face, it prevents any possibility for dialogue, for contact with people outside the community. And the very thing I am doing
I'm going to stop now. I could show you more, but I think you have a pretty good sense of what we've done. And what I'd really be grateful for is your thoughts about what we can do to make this work for you. We're hoping that in the next year, we're going to be able to make these materials available to students around the world who are studying law, who are studying sociology, who are studying political science. We're in the process of producing a book. We have a book. The book we have is published by an American publisher for the American legal market, and the price is $280 for a copy. That's about what, that's about 300,000 won, somewhere around there. We are in the process of producing a book that will cost about $25 and will cover all of the statutes, constitutional provisions, treaties, and case decisions discussed in these 16 classes. And now the question is, now the question, because we still have time to work with the material, is what would you like to see that's different than what we've done here? Or do you like what we're doing here? Or do you think I should just give up on this project because this is not a good way to teach? You can break my heart, it's okay. So I don't want to keep you too long, but thank you all very, very much for your responses to this, your reaction. It was very helpful to me, and this seems like a great place. I hope I get a chance to come back again sometime, spend a little more time here. Okay, thank you.